I'm not here today to talk about fake news. First of all, fake news as a term has grown out of control and now encompasses everything from the original Russian troll farms to actual verified facts that some people don't want to hear. And no matter what definition you use, fake news only works because people simply don't trust the media. And without trusted news sources, it's easy for people to be fooled by made-up news stories or for politicians to dismiss cold, hard facts. And so I'd rather talk about something that's more core to this problem, which is trust. And how do we make journalism that deserves people's trust? In 2015, I co-founded City Bureau, a journalism lab based in Chicago, to answer that question and to imagine a future of local media where trust is at the center of everything we do. I've been in this industry about 10 years working as an editor from places like trade publications, a national ideas magazine, neighborhood news website, and a big city glossy magazine. What I've learned is a simple truth that a lot of people intuitively understand but feel like they can't fix, which is that the vast majority of journalism is made for and funded by people with money. And because of America's awful legacy of racism, that also means journalism's target audience is more white and has more political power than the rest of the country. So if you think about all the biggest news stories of the day, whether it's the climate crisis, pandemic, economic turmoil, or policing, the people who are most directly affected by those issues, who need news and information the most, are looking for it in the news media that's not serving them. So it's not surprising that American news media has some of the lowest rates of trust of all institutions in the country. And that is the fertile ground where fake news and disinformation has taken root. So how do we change that? If we're going to make journalism that deserves people's trust, we have to completely rethink the way journalism is made. Some of you might be familiar with Maslow and his hierarchy of needs. It's a concept in psychology that says you need to have your basic needs met at the bottom of the pyramid, like physiological needs and safety needs, before you can dedicate your time and energy to higher level psychological needs at the top of the pyramid, like esteem and belonging. And if you're lucky enough to climb to the top of this pyramid, then you're working on something that Maslow called self-actualization, which is the fulfillment of your full potential. So for instance, if I am looking for food and water and can't find it, well, it's going to be really hard for me to be building any relationships. And without healthy relationships in my life, well, it's going to be even harder for me to reach my full potential. So much like other concepts in psychology, this hierarchy is not exactly cut and dry, and there's still debate over the details. But if you bring it into the world of journalism, we have this simple tool that helps us answer an essential question, which is our work actually making anybody's lives better? This hierarchy of information needs is what we need to move forward together. Information is power. We know that the right information at the right time can be transformative to somebody. If you need basic information to get through the day, whether it's finding healthy food for your family or a safe place to stay the night, that's critical. And as journalists, if we're trying to build a solid foundation of trust, then we should dedicate more of our resources to making sure those needs are met first. And sometimes we do, but it's more of an exception than the rule. Think about disaster reporting and stories about the locations of hurricane shelters, or how to reunite with a lost family member. If a disaster is huge and it affects everybody equally, that's front page news. But if a disaster affects a smaller group of people, people who are at the margins of society, there's simply not a lot of news and information made for them. At a big picture level, you can see this because There are dozens of websites and publications that are made for the stock market, people trying to get rich on that stock market. On the other hand, very few publications available if you're looking for affordable housing or trying to avoid eviction. This hierarchy of information needs gives us an ability to see that we need to completely reprioritize our journalism. For instance, if you think about the evening news, turn on the TV and you see these blaring headlines about 4 killed in a weekend shooting. It might have some information about where it happened or the race and the age of people involved. But ask yourself, do those stories actually fill any of your information needs? Do they make you feel like you understand why that gun violence happened? Or if you're a concerned citizen and want to prevent future shootings, does that help you do that? All those stories do is give you a sense of fear. Fear of a neighborhood, fear of a city, fear of an entire race of people. Now, imagine if you witnessed the shooting or you know somebody who was involved. You have really basic immediate needs, like maybe mental health, trying to navigate that trauma. Or the most simple need, which is just understanding where the funeral is so that you can grieve with your loved ones. Those things aren't going to be the news stories either, which begs the question, if these stories aren't filling any public need, then why do they get so much airtime? We need to look at this hierarchy of information needs. It helps us understand how are we making sure the information that we give has a purpose. Too many stories nowadays are what I like to call, wow, that's awful stories. You read an article, you turn on the radio, or you watch a video clip, and you might feel generally more informed about this world, and you might have a sense of accomplishment because of it. But then what? If that story is about injustice, you might feel sad or angry, or maybe even feel powerless. It might make you hate the news. Now, imagine that you are convicted of a crime that you didn't commit. By some estimates, this happens to 10,000 Americans a year. You're in prison, and you're trying to fight your case, trying to appeal it and get a retrial, realizing how hard it is, how the system was built to make it hard to even file the paperwork that should be your path to freedom. Yeah, a journalist might write a story about that, and somebody somewhere will read it, and they'll think, wow, that's awful. But what do you need at that moment? You need information about the appeal system so that you can navigate that. You need advice on how to stay motivated when things get hard. You need information that's shareable for your friends and family so they can understand what's going on. That is a basic information need to you, the need for freedom. So at City Bureau, when we met a young man in this exact situation, instead of taking that information and writing a story so that someone in a faraway place might be generally more informed about what's going on, we asked the people who are directly affected, how can this be helpful to you? And that's how we made After the Trial, an illustrated guide to the appeals process with easy to understand visuals and articles. And then we printed it out and we distributed it to prisons for free. It might not look like the journalism that you're used to, but after all, it includes the first-person stories of people who are impacted. It quotes legal experts and advocates, and it's entirely fact-checked. We just packaged that information for people who needed it the most. In that same vein, when COVID-19 hit at City Bureau, we surveyed community groups and asked them, what can we do to be helpful right now? What we learned was that with the flood of pandemic stories coming around every day, it was really hard to cut through the noise and find access to the critical resources that they needed. And so we spent weeks compiling over 1,300 resources, ways to apply for aid like money, legal help, housing, and food. And we put it all into one single searchable database and translated it into 12 languages. I've been all over the journalism industry, and it wasn't until I got to City Bureau that I had the freedom to experiment with different types of journalism, besides just telling a great story. Luckily, since we started down this road, we've met amazing people scattered across the country doing the same work and chipping away at distrust. In Detroit, at Outlier Media, they are using 311 data and text message surveys to find out what people are looking for. And then they use their investigative skills to help people navigate eviction or foreclosure, or to stop utility shutoffs. And their work has elevated those issues to the level of creating local policy change, proving that you don't have to choose, you can actually serve the people who are most affected while also pulling for long-term solutions. And context is critical. In Douglas, Arizona, Spaceship Media has used this hierarchy to try to prioritize what information needs are the biggest for them. They found out that border crossing rules change often, and that is the biggest news for a lot of people in that community. For us here in Chicago, it might sound like an abstract information need, but for them, it's crucial to their everyday lives. And just like Maslow's original hierarchy, when you put this into the real world, it starts to get messy. In Newark, Free Press and the Center for Cooperative Media brought this activity to a group of community members, and they started asking all these big picture questions around the edges, like how do we make sure we keep people on the ground? Or how do we get rid of the gatekeepers? How do we make sure contributors are being paid? They debated, should this belong here, or maybe this belongs here, or maybe this doesn't belong here at all. But that messiness is the beauty of it. We should be constantly debating and revising and challenging our assumptions around this pyramid. For too long, news has been dictated by journalists who are targeting a single type of audience. When you bring more people into that picture, you get something that's a lot more complex, something that matches the realities that we live in. News media is in a deep crisis. In the decade since 2008, more than 30,000 journalism jobs have been lost. That's a quarter of the industry. Besides the lack of public trust, we're also dealing with predatory hedge fund owners, a lack of revenue models, and a spike in physical assaults of journalists and also arrests. Business as usual for American news media is simply not sustainable. This hierarchy of information needs, this shape, however you want to draw it, forces us to rethink how and why we serve our communities. But it's only a start. We still need to do that hard work of bringing people together, even people who hate the media, to think of a new way forward. We need to recruit journalists and newsroom leaders from diverse perspectives who can lead that conversation. And we need to stop thinking of our audiences as passive consumers and start thinking of them as active partners. We can equip our communities to build the future of journalism together with a strong foundation that's bottom up instead of top down and can fight the wave of fake news and disinformation that threatens our democracy. That is how we build a journalism that deserves people's trust. Thank you.